my slides, and then we will talk about what's happening tonight. So we will be recording, live streaming on Facebook and publishing the Climate Cafe on our YouTube channel. So if you do not want to be recorded, then you can just completely take off your camera, and your microphone is off just now, but you can keep it off and you can ask any question through the chat facility. So all microphones will be muted during the presentations, except for the speaker and the chair. You can use the chat to ask for clarification of a point while the speakers are speaking, but there's no questions at that point. We do all the questions at the end, but you can pop in a question into the chat when you feel like it, as it were. So please be mindful and respectful of all involved in the cafe. We're all nice people. I want to stay that way. So the Q&A session. So we'll have all the speakers speak, and after that we'll have the Q&A session. To take part in that Q&A session, just pop an asterisk into the chat. State who you're directing your question to. There are a lot of carriers tonight, so it could be confusing, but you can just say speaker 1, 2, 3. Give a quick summary of your question. Wait until Jeff, who's going to the Q&A session, can you give us a wave, Jeff? There you go. Asks you to state your question. You can then, at that point, I will have allowed you all to unmute yourselves. So unmute yourself to ask the question, then obviously mute yourself after that, so that we can't hear all the noise going on in the background. And if you would prefer Jeff to ask a question, then just say that in the chat too, and he can do that. He's quite willing to do that. So tonight's Climate Cafe is on food growing and community relations, and we have some sterling people speaking. We have Mhairi Player, a local food grower, who's going to talk about using short supply chains to help create a better food system, followed by Maddie and Arthur from the Crafty Pickle, speak about doing business differently to fight food waste. And last but definitely not least, Kerry Ritchie and Kerry Allison speaking about best practice for community-based businesses. So that's our wonderful speakers for tonight, and they're going to speak in that order. Our future events and cafes, we have an event coming up actually on Thursday, but it's sold out, so I won't say too much about that, but it will be coming on again in Climate Week, so you can check out the event in Climate Week if you want to take part. It's about using phones to film, do bits of filming for social media and to be able to teach other people how to do it too. So it's quite good for teachers. So our Creating Social Media Content Toolkit for Sustainable Charities and Businesses is on the 18th of February. You can find all our events on Eventbrite, as is our Understanding Planet Climate Cafe, which is our next Climate Cafe on the first Tuesday of March. And then Climate Week Northeast is coming very, very quickly to the fore. We're just creating the brochure just now, so it will be out in the next couple of weeks, but you can find most of the events already on climateweeknortheast.org. So check out our Facebook page, Climate Week Northeast Facebook page, and also the website for more details. Also, to keep you in the know, I don't know if you're aware, but Transition Network is doing kind of revisioning events. And they are between the 3rd and the 20th of March, so you can check that out on that link there. It's Transition Bounce Forward, so you can always just search for it as well. So there's some of the future events and cafes. There are always going to be more coming up. This is ACA Media, so you can always find us on our website, the Climate Week Northeast website, our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And all of the speakers' talks and our Q&A session will be on our YouTube channel as well tonight. Right, so that is me finished. Now it's over to our wonderful Mhairi to kick us off. Mhairi, over to you. So Mhairi, you need to unmute yourself, my dear.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Mhairi and I run a small regenerative farm out at Hatton of Fintry in Aberdeenshire, and I'm also involved in food activism. A little bit of background on how I got into growing. I was born into small-scale agriculture. My grandfather was a tenant farmer on the Lochiel estate in Fort William. And during my kind of childhood and young adults, I saw a lot of change within small-scale agriculture. There was mainly just older people in it. There was very few full-time crofters. This had quite a lot of impact on the rural economy and on the landscape and the way that the farms worked. And very much there was the kind of message that there were no jobs within the rural economy, and that we should no real future in small-scale agriculture at that time. So I came to Aberdeen, I trained and became an occupational therapist. But then in my early 30s, I had a serious illness while I had young children, and I lost my job, and I decided to return to growing, originally as a way of compensating for my loss of income. We basically lived off a lot of the things that I grew. And it had some really positive effects in that it connected me back to a food system that I had become slightly disconnected from it, even in that small time of being away from the craft. I also improved my health and well-being. Actually having fresh food, seasonal food, nutritious food made a big difference to my return to health. And I also was able to build up a kind of social economy, in that I was able to use the vegetables I was growing to get people to do me favours and things like that. And I changed from being quite a ill-dependent person to having a kind of role in life again and having opportunities. So from that, I set up my farm and my little business, which I've realised I've got this wrong, have I? And I set up Beric with produce. And in a nutshell, what this is, we are based on a woodland. It's mainly a monoculture woodland of citrus spruce that was planted in 1990. And we've been working with Scottish Forestry to look at how we can manage it better. We can change it to more suitable tree species and include some agri-forestry. And in doing that, we have created a little bit of capital, which is allowing us to put in better infrastructure and stuff. We just put in off-grid solar and stuff like that, which has been really helpful. We've been able to start our first enterprise, which is on the kind of open land in amongst the woodland as well. And our first enterprise has been a market garden. We are growing, drawing on principles such as permaculture, organic principles. We tend to use a no-till system at the moment. We've got a bit of forest garden going on, and we've got some agri-forestry going on within the market garden. We grow between 45 and 50 seasonal varieties of veg within the year, and we have 10 different types of fruit, but they're at an early stage. Our bushes and trees are just beginning to mature now. We mostly grow annuals because they're the veg that people recognise going to market, but we are beginning to increase our perennials as well, which we quite like because this is good for our soil management, and they often are more unusual veg that can cover the hunger gaps of kind of March, April, May here. We have some undercover growing as well. I've not got this quite on the right view. So from that, I did a lot of retraining when I first started this project. I did some online training in regenerative agriculture. I also did a making living from local food, mentorship from Nourish. And we came up with the idea that we needed to have 3 elements for our farm to work. The first thing we wanted was to really focus on the ecology of our farm. We wanted to be sure that we were maintaining good soil. We were even increasing our topsoil and looking a lot at keeping it covered. We also wanted to make sure that we were building really strong ecosystems. There's a lot of wildlife already in the woodland, and we wanted to keep that and improve on that if possible. We also wanted to make sure that some of the things that we were doing in agriculture could contribute to some of the solutions to climate change, and we've done things such as a carbon farm audit, etc. The second thing we wanted was that we would be sustainable economically, that really if we were going to put 80 hours of work in a week, that this was going to provide a livelihood for us that would be able to keep a roof over our children's heads and pay for them to go to university and feed them, etc. We wanted to not really rely heavily on grants and subsidies if we could. We are actually below the single farm payment subsidy in size. We also wanted to use the resources well within the farm so that we could have different forms of capital moving around the farm, which we've managed to do a bit with our woodland, paying for some of our early infrastructure. And we wanted to be able to see that future generations and plan for future generations. That didn't necessarily have to be our own, but it was really looking that we wouldn't be farming when we were 80 years old and kind of stuck in that system. That's the hope anyway. And finally, we wanted to connect to the community. We wanted to try and build part of the food system that was a bit more socially just. At our heart, we really just wanted to provide good food to the community. We wanted to work in collaboration with other people that were looking at building a better food system within the area, and we wanted to support other local businesses. And finally, I am particularly keen on providing skills and training to young people. So in order to meet these three elements of our design and our plans, we decided to use a direct sales model to sell. So at the moment, the percentages in brackets there, how much the farm makes from each of the models. So for example, 98 to 100% of the veg box outlay comes directly to us as the salespeople. So these are in the order of which is the outlet that provides the most money to the farm and which is the outlet that provides the least money to the farm. So we have a veg box scheme, which is a modified community supported agricultural scheme and works to that model. Our veg box scheme covers Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire near and around Hatton of Fintry, going into Dyson and West Hill. What we try to encourage people to do is to sign up for a season. This year we ran a 30-week season running from May to December, and we're hoping to extend that into January and February 2022, as that would be now. We say it's slightly modified, the community supported agricultural model, in that we don't insist that people take boxes each week. They can take holidays and breaks, but we do try and encourage them to commit to us for a season. This year we're looking at putting in a kind of box scheme website beside it, and we've decided, I think, that I keep changing my mind, that we might use the UBI system. It's quite a new system that's come from New Zealand. It stands for out of our own backyards, I think is what it stands for. It doesn't really change how our veg box has been running. It just is a website or an easier management system for me. On top of the 80 hours often of growing, delivering, harvesting, you had all the admin as well, which I found quite difficult to keep up with. I'm only a very small venture, there's just myself, a little help from the family, and that was quite challenging this year. So we've really looked at how I can improve that. The other thing that the UBI has is the ability for me to communicate quickly and better with our box customers, so that I can do the things that I didn't do quite as well this year, which was tell them what they were going to get in their boxes and other things that like that help them plan, and it also has recipes and other things. We have our second outlet is we have some cafes on D side. We have 3 cafes at the moment. We've had interest from another 2 who are just really keen to get food that comes from the local area and they can see how it's being produced. We also put some veg onto the Aberdeen and Shires Food Hub, which is run out of a small business called Hedson's Catering in Blackburn, and it acts really as a local kind of supermarket. We also do to some independent shops, one in Torfins and one in Rosemount. They're not a massive amount of our intake, outlet financially, but they've actually been hugely supportive of us in other ways, in introducing us to other people. They always share our social media and stuff. Emma at Platform 22 and both Catherine and Mike at Gourmet Cheese have really been very supportive of me as a person as well, and that's been very helpful when you're starting out. And finally, when we were able to do that, when in the summer, when restrictions this year were okay, we did some farm gate sales. These were useful for people who just wanted a small bit of veg, or they particularly wanted to come and get the veg from the farm, or they were outside our selling area, they came to the farm and picked up some veg from us. So what's the advantages of a food system like this? One of the big things that I learned when I worked for the NHS was the importance of evidence-based and best practice for making decisions. So we spend, as a grower, I spend a lot of time looking at the best practices for growing and building up an evidence base and reflecting on how we grow and how we should store, how we should harvest, what we should grow to make it as nutritious and as good quality for people as we can. We are the member of the Land Workers Alliance and the Organic Growers, and I was recently at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and all this is really helpful for gathering that evidence. We also do some little trials of ourselves for growing, trying different things and measuring them. We collect a lot of data, and we're also connected with a lot of the small market gardens in Scotland, again sharing best practice and trying to look at how to grow in the best way possible for good nutritious food. We also provide some food security. What's became very obvious during the COVID outbreak particularly, and the worries that people have around Brexit, is that actually our food systems are really quite fragile. In Scotland, only 0.33% of land is used for vegetable growth, and that's about a third of what's used in England. But it's still a really, really small amount of the agricultural land, and 50% of all veg in the UK is imported as of the statistics from last year, and that in Scotland is actually even higher. So by being able to direct sell just to our local area, we're helping to secure some veg to the local area. The other advantage we have is that we get all our outputs at the beginning of our growing season. We don't have a huge amount of things that we need to buy, but all our seeds, all our potting composts and everything is bought at the beginning of the season, which allows us to set our price right across the season as static prices, both our wholesale price and our direct veg price is set now. And it means that whatever happens to food prices, because we don't have many other fluctuating costs, we're able to provide a steady price for people, which I think is really helpful. We also have had a bit of climate variability. We started growing in 2018. If people remember, that was the year there was no water falling from the sky. It was we had about 17 or 18 weeks where we got 1 millimetre of rain. And we've also had extremely wet times, like recently there was a lot of flooding, particularly Hatton and Finchley, if people know it, can be quite isolated and cut off by the way that the river runs through it. And we have had those builds up of water, and we've got a really cold snap at the moment. But the way that we have been growing and the improvements we've seen in the soil has kind of meant that we find that we're actually getting still a really good yield. We're getting a lot of stability within our market garden. We've got a lot of microclimates with the way that we've put the trees in and everything. And even this week, even at -2, I've still managed to get things out of the ground. And so that the most worrying thing you might get if you signed up to us is a substitution, i.e. it might be cauliflowers this week, not next week. But on the whole, we can provide fairly secure access to food. The other point is food access. I'm not going to go heavily into food poverty themes here because they're very complex, but there has been criticism of veg box schemes, particularly organic ones, that they can be quite expensive. But obviously there are consequences of just always providing food cheaply. We work very hard to create a fair price. And what we try to do is make our farm practices really lean. We try to share equipment with other small farms so that really we can keep the price as fair as possible. We're also part of the Veg Box Initiative scheme, run by Small Veg Boxes in Scotland, which is looking at a lot of the solutions that could, or possibilities that could work around veg boxes and providing access to lower income customers, maybe through the NHS or charities. I talked earlier a bit about our Ubi website. One of the advantages of that website is that it also allows you to credit people for participating. So if they come and help you, you can credit them the same thing that would really be a cost, so that at some point in a later date, they could then buy veg that wouldn't cost them any money, but it would come out through our credit system. And that would work really well for us. The other thing is that some people who are in the veg box scheme, instead of taking a holiday, they choose to give their money back into the farm, and that allows us to give a veg box to somebody who wouldn't normally be able to get one. So that's the advantages. What are the challenges? There are a lot of challenges still with them. I've been on a Zoom today with the veg box people, and we've just been talking a lot about the difficulties with matching the supply and the demand chain for veg. It is particularly poor in Scotland still. In lots of ways, there really isn't enough supply of veg. If everybody wanted to have 5 lots of fruit and veg a day, we would really struggle to manage that in Scotland. The problem locally, of course, is if there is no supply, people who want to sell veg either in their shops or use them in the restaurants or whatever will go elsewhere, understandably, to get that veg, and you get this kind of supply and demand difficulty. So there needs to be some commitment really as well from hospitality and retail to actually buy local first. Land is a massively complex issue, owning and renting land, but at the moment there's not many policies and planning situations in place that are open enough or flexible enough or really there to create opportunities for people to grow veg or work in a commercial veg arena. I asked Aberdeen City Council last year, I asked them about their food growing strategy and how they could increase the amount of growing. And they said it would be 5 years till they considered any use of land for any intensive food growing, even on a CIC basis or a CSA model or a community growing cooperative basis. Though they did say they were kind of going to be outsourcing this slightly, so I'm hopeful that maybe that is something that will move a bit quicker than they said. They were saying that they wanted really to focus on grow your own, allotments and community gardens, and all of these are really, really high value projects, but they're not really creating an increase in the food system levels, and they don't have the same job opportunities on the whole attached to them. And it seems a shame that it's a bit of a missed opportunity at the moment, considering particularly a rise in young unemployment following COVID, that a more flexible policy or planning could probably resolve a lot of issues around the food system. A rise in localism has been seen nationally during the last year, which is a really, really positive thing, but it is actually now creating slightly different cracks in the food chain, and also along with the import and export following Brexit. So it's important, especially in the veg and plant-based industry, to look at a rise in seasonalism and looking at more seasonal veg. I feel that this will really improve people's health and the connection between health and the land. And it might also stop a lot of unnecessary trade from climate vulnerable areas. And I've realised, and I just have a few websites there that are helpful if people are interested in some of the things I talked about. And that is me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. That was very interesting. And now I